Access to the data. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Jumping in. At a very big level, really high level, Power BI enables two ways of distributing content to users. One is where we started and we grew up, which is the self-service BI. A user who's motivated finds a piece of data, wants to share it, quickly grabs Power BI, grabs Power BI desktop, uploads it, shares it with their friends. Now suddenly everyone's using it. That's all self-service. And then there's centralized BI. This is the IT team, maybe supporting the C-suite, maybe supporting a business group, trying to make sure that everyone in the organization has access to the truthful data set, the one that is up to date, the one that the measures add up at the end of the day. And all those things. How does someone do that? Well, Power BI is a platform in the cloud that allows you to do that easily. And I'll talk through all the major skills and tools that you have for doing that. So we'll start here. Who here has published a report to Power BI? Well, okay, most of the room. So you're probably familiar with workspaces and apps. These are the two foundational tools that you have for workspaces, creating content, collaborating with your team to build the content, and apps, the tool for distributing content at scale to an organization. Now these two sometimes get confused. Why would I use a workspace? Why would you use an app? This is probably the first thing that you should know as you walk into a Power BI report. The first thing to know is that we create content in workspaces. This is where we publish reports and dashboards. If we want to work as a team, we work there together. Now it gets kind of tricky once I have a stakeholder who really shouldn't be touching the report, but needs to review it before we roll it out to someone. And so you have some tools. So typically if a user needs access to just one item, you just share that individual item. Now after you do this a couple of times, it gets harder and harder and harder to maintain. And so you have to ask yourself, should I then give them access to the workspace? And maybe I should. And traditionally you give them the member role in a workspace, which lets them upload content, change content, but also view all of the content in that workspace. And we'll talk about how that capability changes in the future as we add what we call the viewer role. We'll talk extensively about that later. But I can add them to the workspace. Then they have access to all of the content. And the member role, those roles have uniform permissions, so they always have the same permissions on all the items that are in that workspace. It makes it really easy to manage that content at scale. But now what happens when I have 18,000 sales reps and they all need access to their yearly review report that says, did they attain their quota? Well, I'm not going to give 18,000 people access to that workspace. Like, they would get lost. If my CEO wakes up in the morning, right, at 4 in the morning and says, how are we doing on Net Promoter Score, right? Well, guess what? You're not going to be telling them to go to a workspace and figure out or remember that link you sent them in email. What you're going to do is you're going to create an app. You're going to package all that official content you want your broad stakeholders to have access to. And you're going to create that app and send it out to those users. And apps are interesting because they also take a copy of the reports. So that you can have a stable copy in the app while you continue making changes in your workspace. Every time you update your app, the updates get applied. And so you can add these 18,000 users or your CEO and their executive team into that app workspace. And that's pretty much the foundational piece. Very much misunderstood, but that's the foundational piece. So now let's talk about how we're going to bring more and more value into that existing ecosystem so that you can distribute authoritative data. And that's the new thing that we announced, and it's actually rolled out today, is shared data sets. Shared data sets allow you to have a data set that you own and maintain and curate. You determine who has access to it. You manage that, typically through security groups. And then you distribute that broadly within your organization so that all the business groups that are building on top of your enterprise data and all of the ad hoc users who are building on top of your data know that they're using the certified data set that IT provided for them, and that's the one they should use, not the one their friend had that they uploaded into their own little workspace. right? And so it gives you a single source of truth that allows, and the tools to distribute that broadly. And we're going to go into that here as we go through. So the first tool that we provide around shared data sets is the ability to discover them. And we have integrated a browser or a picker for data sets that shows you all of the data sets that you as a Power BI user have access to in a single screen. And you can search through that. It's integrated in the Power BI service when you go create a report in a workspace. And it's also integrated in the Power BI desktop when you press the Power BI Datasets button. So it gives a simple, easy way for those to get exposed. The second thing that we've done is we've enabled IT to promote and to certify data sets. Certification is a privileged operation. As an IT admin, you go into the Power BI admin portal and you choose who in your organization can certify. Not just anyone can certify. And it's great because then you can maintain control over that one source of truth. Now, end users will see what we call an endorsement when they go to use that data set. And it can either say certified or it can say promoted. And then they can tell that that's a better data set than the other one. Now, promoted is important because it allows business groups to choose the data sets that they want the rest of the organization to use without the need to call the IT admin. Because sometimes finding the admin or getting them to say yes is a little hard. So we've actually enabled both this ability from the top level to assert what is truthful, and also from the bottom level, if you have a cool data set that you as a business unit need to get quickly in front of all the users who should be using it, you can go do both. And it's a very nice and flexible experience. So with that, let's quickly jump in and do a demo of the shared data set capability. So let's see. So this is Power BI, believe it or not. Now, if you were at the keynote, we also demoed what we call the new look. I'm kind of stealing my own thunder here because later we'll talk a little bit more about the new look. But it's designed to make it easier for users to find content and be more welcoming for new users. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the life cycle of using a data set as a shared data set. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Datasets tab, and you see I have this opportunity analysis sample, right? And what I can do here is I can go into the ... menu and come down into the settings for this data set. And then we'll go down here to endorsement, and we'll zoom in on that. So now what you can see is I can choose different levels of endorsement. I can have promoted, I can have certified. Why do I have certified? I have certified because an IT admin gave me the right to certify users. This is disabled for the vast majority of end users. I'll show you here in a second where we change that. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go set the promoted, and I'm going to go and say apply. So now that I've done this, if I come back into the data set, you'll notice that I've just promoted the data set. It's endorsed as promoted. Okay. Now I can do that because, and ever so fortuitously, I am logged in as the Power BI admin here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Power BI admin portal, and I'm going to go to tenant settings. And within tenant settings, there is an option for endorsing data sets. And you see that I have this data set certification, and I've enabled it, right? So what this means is that I can actually go and give different users. Now you notice in this organization, I haven't given everyone the ability to certify data set. I gave it to the members of this security group. And that's important. If you have an access management process within your organization, you can set up a rule that someone can request to become a certifier, someone can review that, their manager or their manager's manager can approve it, and presto whammo, in Power BI you can certify things. So it's a way in which we've made it super simple for you to use those tools that we have in order to certify. So great, so that's good enough, right? Now I have my data set here, and I'm going to, I wasn't supposed to press apply all. So, okay, we're here. So let's go back to the data set. So now how do I go about creating content on this data set? Well, what I could do is even in this workspace, I could go create a report. And I could see this opportunity analysis sample is listed. You'll also notice that I have several other data sets here that are certified within this organization. So as you know, as I would, I can go ahead and create a report, select my opportunity analysis data set, and continue on my day, select some facts, something about revenue, maybe something about opportunity, maybe, and here we go. So I have my report. Save this report. So now I have the report. Now this is all well and good. I have this report in this workspace. What's interesting about shared data sets is they're no longer locked in an individual workspace as they have been. I can use this data set in any workspace that I have access to where I can create content. So let's go here and let's do this. Let's go to a different workspace. And it has a very similar name, but it's called Destination. And we'll talk about it in a second. And let's say I wanted to go and find my data sets. There's a little option down here for Publish Data Set, which I'll just go ahead and click on. And you'll notice I'm presented with the exact same screen as I had before. And so I can choose the exact same data set as I had before. And I can create, hopefully, the exact same report as I did before. But now, I'm not editing this in the workspace where the data set lives. I'm creating and editing this in a different workspace. And what that means is you as IT can curate the official sets of data sets in your workspace that you control and enable everyone else who should have access to create their content to create it in their workspaces. It doesn't clutter your workspace. You know exactly which things you maintain versus other people maintain. So it's a foundational shift in how data sets can be used and, let's say, reused. But they won't ever access the data until the person who manages that data set gives them permission. And we'll talk about that in detail in a little bit. The next thing to say is that when I'm taking these reports and these dashboards, I might want to deliver them out to end users. And one of the key things that we've done is that we've actually enabled a flow where, as an app user, I could actually save a copy of an app report. What that means is apps, when I send an app to 18,000 people, let's be honest, right? I didn't design it for each individual person, right? Each individual person has their own job, their own problem. About curating those enterprise data sets, we also think about which workspace they live in and who are members of that workspace, which security groups have access, and how you manage that so that you're rolling that out appropriately. So let's take a couple of examples just to iron out the point. So if I have a workspace, and you'll notice that it has a data set, and user one has some permissions. They have read and build. Read allows them to consume content. Build allows them to create content on that data set. Or they have app or app build. And what that means is they can view the content through an app, or they can build because they got it through the app permissions. So if that user is a member of another workspace, they actually have permission to edit the reports and dashboards in that workspace to their heart's degree. And RLS is fully enforced. Okay? And that's because, again, that user doesn't have the right permission. Now, if the user accesses an app, again, they have app or app build. They don't have right on the data set. So again, when the user accesses that, they enforce RLS. You really want to wait for the last build on each one of these slides, because more text keeps appearing. So then you have a very secure way of distributing this truthful piece of content, this truthful data, out to your end users. Now let's see what happens if I change the scenario and I make that user an admin, a member, or a contributor on Workspace 1. Well, what happens is they get the right permission. And when they get that right permission, suddenly these scenarios where RLS was enforced, RLS is no longer enforced because that user has the right permission. Okay, so it's really important that as we start deploying shared data sets and start using them, these rules will apply. Interestingly, when I give someone the viewer, you'll notice that the 3 roles that are there are admin member and contributor. It does not say viewer, because viewers only get read permission. So for a viewer in that same workspace, the role level security will apply. Right. Okay, so now with that, let's talk a little bit about licensing. We kind of touched on it earlier in the question, but let's go through a little bit. So the check marks, green, mean you can access, and the X's, red, mean you cannot access. And so what's important is that when you have a workspace or a shared report or an app or an embedded report or dashboard, and it's in a shared capacity, the user needs a pro license. However, if you move that same
small brain icon, and if I press the button, I can add the machine learning model. At this point, I'm instructing Power BI to create a machine learning model on top of that data flow, on top of that entity. The first thing that I have to do is to specify what is that I'm trying to predict. Now, in this case, I really want to predict whether a pump is going to be not functional. I want to predict if the pump is going to fail. When I hit next, Power BI is going to do a few things. The first thing is that it's going to look at the data inside that column. There are many machine learning techniques. Based on the data inside, Power BI may decide to suggest me to use classification, regression, forecasting, or different other techniques. In this case, Power BI detected that my column is a Boolean. It has 2 states, true and false. And it suggests that I'm doing binary prediction. I'm not limited to that. I can go here, click this link, and pick a different model. And the data type behind this column supports a few classes of algorithms. And the one I choose to do now is binary prediction because indeed, it's a 2-state problem. Now, we do support regression. Very soon we are going to add forecasting to the OTML toolkit. We do support general classification, and we do support binary prediction. And I'd like to just describe for a second the difference between general classification and binary prediction. So general classification is the problem of differentiating fruits between orange, apples, bananas, and whatever. I want to have a clear demarcation line. The classification models are going to truly try to separate all the classes best. The binary prediction models are in a sense very similar to general classification. Now first, they are focusing on 2 states. So I can say that I'm looking for apples and not apples. But the second thing about binary prediction is that in binary prediction, I'm kind of hinting the model what I care about. I want to find apples. Apples are important to me. I want to throw away non-apples. And that means that the report that we are going to produce allows me to assign a value to a prediction, to a correct finding of an apple. Just like in this case, I'm going to assign a value to identification of a pump that doesn't work. So I'm going to use binary prediction, as I said, for this task, because I do have a value for the pump that I'm detecting. I'm hitting next. The next thing that Power BI does is actually just a bit of magic. It will look at all the data in my data flow, and it's going to analyze it. It's going to analyze the correlations between the fields in my data flow and my target. And if we look here for a second, we can see that this is a recommended feature, amount to TSH. It means that our analysis found a certain connection between that feature and my target. We see that funder, for instance, is not a recommended feature. Funder is not a recommended feature because it has high cardinality. That means that I have lots of distinct values there that do not seem to connect in any way to my data. There's not much to learn from those distinct values. I'm going to scroll down to one of my favorite pieces of information found by this analysis, which emphasizes one of my mistakes, because I rushed a bit for this demo. But everything is for the better. Look at this, high correlation. So the Boolean column that I created that by putting an if statement in Power Query. I'm basically saying if the status group is not functional, then true. Power BI looked at this. It detected that from a statistical perspective, the values in my target are very tightly correlated with the status group. So it detected this as what is called the leaky predictor, a column that foretells the future, and it shouldn't be there because probably I do not have access to it. I may disagree with Power BI. I may go and check that box. But Power BI decided that this is going to give me a false accuracy in the model.
And just to kind of add to this is an enrichment and addition we made to automated ML. And it's actually a direct result of the feedback that we
in Power Query. Let's assume that I'm happy with the data that I have here and I want to move to creating a machine learning model. I need to name my model, predict will fail or something like this. I can, okay, name exists. I can assign a label to my target. I'm going to say true and false just to avoid any confusion. Please keep in mind, true means it will fail. False means it won't. And then if I hit save and refresh, we are going to start training the machine learning model. I'm not going to train it right now, and I'll explain in a second why. But the result of training the machine learning model is a report, which, I lost my mouse, looks more or less like this. Now, I'm going to go through a few important sections of this report. The top of the report tells me that Power BI did what is to be expected from a standard machine learning development process. It tells me, as you will see here, that we split the data into training and testing. We picked an algorithm. We did, I mean, any statistician will tell you that we need to do that. And I'm not going to spend too much time explaining why we did this. Happy to take any questions later. But then, Power BI tells me which are the key influencers. It tells me which of the features inside my data actually strongly impact the outcome. If you see here, we see that the quantity of water, that the water point type and everything else do impact the target. The tornado chart that you see tells me which are the most important features. If you look at this quantity field for just a second, on the right-hand side, we tell you how it impacts the target. And yellow means lots of true. So yellow means that you are going to get lots of pump failures. And the way I interpret this is that if the land is very dry, then the pump is very, very likely to fail. Now, this is kind of obvious, but there is an easy solution there. That means that if you put a sensor on that pump, you can actually prevent it, because somebody, knowing that the land is very dry, yet decided to install a pump because it's needed. So this is a very actionable piece of information that I'm getting here. And I'll step out of this and go one step further and show you how Power BI tells me something about the accuracy of the model. So a model is never perfect. It may be very useful. A model is going to make predictions. But you have to keep in mind that the model does not know anything about true or false. The model is a mathematical construct which is going to yield a number. It's going to produce a number between 0 and 1, and we choose to call that number a probability. Now, in real-life situations, we tend to believe that 50% means something. We tend to believe that everything about 50% is like a good candidate for true, and anything below 50% is not such a good candidate for true. But in reality, that 50% cutoff is a bit arbitrary. Now, if you think of this, and the model it's a good mathematical construct. It's optimized for something. If you think of this 50% threshold as a bar, and again, we are looking for pumps. If you raise that bar, it means that everything that exceeds the bar has a very high likelihood of being a correct prediction. If you think in terms of, correlating test scores with children's knowledge of a subject, it's never perfect. But you can say that, among people who score 90% or higher, there is a higher probability to have good mastering of the subject than among people who have 0 to 10% scores. Again, there are always mistakes, but raising the bar increases the chances. Increases what is the purity of results above the bar. And this purity of results above the bar, correctness of true predictions above the bar, is called precision. Now, the problem with precision, it's really nice to have precision. It's really nice that, all my predictions are true. The problem with precision is that if you raise the bar too high, you are missing many children, in my previous example, who are really good, but just did not do well on one test. And the measure that tells me how many of the really good children I've identified with my bar is called recall. And as you imagine now, playing with this bar is basically always a trade-off between precision and recall. Now, if I'm going to use my model in a marketing campaign, if I raise the bar too high, it means that all my customers will respond positively, but I'm going to miss many opportunities. If I lower the bar, then I'm going to find all the customers who are likely to respond, but I'm going to spend lots of money on a marketing campaign. If I'm going back to my pumps situation, if I raise my bar...
Back to next year. So if we jump into the data set view just for a second over here, we look at our customers table. What we have over here is a field that tells us whether a customer who visited us last year, whether they came back this year or not. So it's literally just a field saying not returning or returning. And we have a lot of information about the customer, such as whether maybe they purchased a spa visit when they were here, whether they rented sports equipment, which country are they visiting us from. So lots of potential attributes that could be influencing whether they came back or not. So I started authoring this visual here already. And the key influencers visual you can find over here. It's this little icon that you see over here. It's a private preview, public preview feature, sorry. So if you go into your desktop, you enable it under your features, previews, then you can start using it. It's not available just if you open it up without enabling it. But what I can do here is I can select what field I want to analyze. So I've already gone ahead and added that over here. You can see I'm analyzing my customer field, and that's what's yielding me this question to come up on the screen, which is saying, what influences customers to return? And now I can just start dragging various fields that I think might have an influence. So maybe, what was their initial interest in visiting my hotel in the first place? And I have a couple of options here, and we can see the visualization automatically, behind the scenes, is actually running a logistic regression. And it's telling me, well, we found, based on your data, that customers who come and visit you to relax are more likely to come back than those who come to visit for sightseeing, for sports activities, for honeymoons. So what we're doing on the left-hand side is actually giving you the, we heard again from you guys, is with a Q&A button, it takes you kind of out of the context of the report. You know, you click on this button and you ask your question, and then you kind of have to close the experience and go back into your report. So it's not a seamless experience, it's just part of the whole report. And the analyst doesn't have much control over this experience. They add the button, they can maybe customize and style the button, but once Q&A comes up, that's it. That's controlled by us, basically. So by adding a Q&A visualization, as you can see over here, this is just going to be another visual inside the list of visualizations, as we can see over here. This gives the analyst full control to make this visualization just an integral part of the report. Like I showed in the session yesterday, there's going to be a lot of customization options where you can change. You can make this ugly very, very quickly. And I'm just going to change around some of these things. I'm going to revert to defaults in a second. But you can see, you can change the font colors, the underline colors, the background colors, the suggestion boxes, the font colors of things, and backgrounds. You can make it, look very unlegible very, very quickly. So I'm just going to revert back to defaults. Again, theming, if you apply themes, the visualization will just update. So again, if you're an analyst and you're building this visual, you can just make it a seamless experience. And that's what we're really aiming for. We're adding enhancements, such as these suggested questions, where again, I can just select various questions. And again, these are generated by Power BI. So it helps your business users just get started. What kinds of things can I ask Q&A? This really helps you figure out how to get started with it if it's the first time that you're seeing it. And again, because it's part of just your report, the cross-filtering works. If you remember with Q&A as a button, it's that out-of-body experience almost, where you use it, you close it. Here, if I only want to look at, let's say, electronic arts, the visualization is just going to cross-filter, and that's going to work both ways. So if I select something from the Q&A visual, it's going to cross-filter the rest of my report. And if I select another visual, it's going to cross-filter the Q&A visual. So it just makes it so much more seamless as an experience. If you have ever used, how many of you guys have used Q&A tooling? Okay, a couple of you, thank you. We're going to make this experience a lot easier. Again, if you're not familiar with the Q&A tooling today, it's basically editing a YAML file. So there's a lot of, not really a nice UI experience, a lot of manual work involved. With the new Q&A tooling over here that you see, this is going to be completely something like awesome publisher. Let's use the example from yesterday, and we submit this question. You can firstly immediately see that awesome was not recognized. We don't know what awesome means. We don't have anything defined around awesome in the data model. So there's not much Q&A can do to help us here, because it needs to understand this vocabulary. So when you submit this question, again, we want to make it really simple for you to figure out how you can add new vocabulary, new synonyms in this experience. So we actually use Q&A to almost give back a statement that you just have to answer. So you need to tell us what publishers that are awesome have. They must have some sort of attribute that makes them awesome, that you can help us define. So in this case, I can do something like sentiment, if I can spell is over 0.5. And if I apply this, oh man, my spelling is really off today. There we go. And if I apply this fix, that's going to automatically show me what my new preview of the results looks like. So you can see the visualization has updated. And now this definition just lives inside my data model. Q&A will just know how to treat the word awesome from now on. Similarly, if I want to see what kinds of questions my users are asking, Because that's ultimately what we want to do, right? As an analyst, you want to make sure that when your business users are using Q&A, they can have an experience where they can just have all of their questions answered. But you might not be the subject matter expert, you might not have all of their rich vocabulary, and you can't necessarily anticipate what kinds of questions they'll be asking. So if we jump into this fixed misunderstandings dialogue, this is all of the questions that are being asked inside the service, inside the Power BI service, as the user is interacting with Q&A. So there's going to be a way to link up your Power BI report here with the data set that's published in the service. I think in the long run, this should be done automatically, but in the first iteration, you'll probably be able to just link it. And you can see, all of the questions that were asked, and specifically all of the things that Q&A didn't understand. And this is really valuable for lots of different reasons. One thing is, if there's a question that your users are continuously asking, maybe you should think about adding a visualization to the report to just help them answer it, because clearly that's something that's important to them. But purely from a Q&A perspective, it really allows me to